Vancouver singer-songwriter Daniel Lew is on a mission to uplift the world. His latest album, Destiny, does this actually precisely with 15 original tracks. And what's truly remarkable about Daniel is that he does all of this while dealing with tinnitus. And that's often described as a ringing sound or a buzzing sound in the ear. Daniel will be performing at the Jade Music Fest in Vancouver on November 7th and 8th. That will be followed by performances on Vancouver Island. The first is on November 13th at Victoria House, followed the next evening at Charles Landing in Port Alberni on November 14th. Thanks for speaking with me, Daniel.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Now, let's start with the Jade Music Fest. This isn't your first appearance. Maybe you could share your history with this festival, where it started and where it's gone from there.
Well, there was a former panel member of Jade. His name was Clarence, and we met at a separate event, not related to Jade. It was for producers and songwriters, and he was interested in the fact that I had Chinese heritage, and then he suggested, "Hey, have you heard of Jade Music Festival?" And I said, "No." He's like, "Oh, I think you'd be a great fit for this if you sing or write music in Chinese." And I said, "Oh, well, I do neither of those, so but I would love to have the opportunity." So then, and I thought, "Oh, this is interesting. It seems like the mission is about, promoting Chinese language music and helping, artists reconnect with their mother tongues." I'm like, this is like a door I shut on myself years ago. So that was how I first heard of it. And then I applied and heard back, and then got accepted, and then started talking to the organizer, Charlie, and his wonderful team. And then, yeah, one thing led to the next, and started to learn how to sing in Chinese. It started with like learning like one of the most famous Cantonese pop songs of all time, and my girlfriend Caroline is very familiar with the music from China, and so she was able to help kind of be my how would you say,
Muse?
yeah, she could
Or
help.
guide?
Yeah, guide would be a good word. And then, also try to like create some original music, and then, you know have her chime in and help with that. So I give her a lot of credit for, helping me during those
I have
early
to ask you,
phases.
Daniel, I'm guessing, did your parents speak Cantonese when you were growing up, or did you speak English in the home?
Primarily English. Once in a while, my dad would speak some Cantonese. But to give you a little more backstory, I guess I would be considered third generation because they were also born here. My dad's family did speak Cantonese, but my mom's family spoke a dialect of Cantonese called Toisan,
By Sanya.
which is different. So I think that already created a bit of a language separation in the household because my mom didn't speak Cantonese. So then anytime there would be like, trying to give us exposure to the language, it was only my dad. And he would share a story that there was a certain age in elementary school where I started kind of getting embarrassed, in a sense of like I would be around my non-Chinese friends, and then my dad would suddenly like become Chinese and just like speak more Cantonese to me, and I'd be like,
你打電話
"Dude,
俾我唔該."
yeah, yeah." So he said like I would kind of out him for that, and then he kind of like slowly started to not speak as much. So it's partly my fault when I think about it.
Now I'm curious, Cantonese is a very tonal language. And how challenging is it to sing in Cantonese, let's say, in comparison with Mandarin, which you never learned when you were young?
I think I'm finding them um equally as challenging. I think because first and foremost, my since I don't actually understand the languages very much yet, when I hear a piece of music, it's a piece of music. I'm not looking at it like, oh, this is like a Chinese song. I'm just like, okay, this is a piece of music, and it's the melody that's the main thing that I'm latching onto, because the melody itself carries the tone. So to some degree, the tonal language itself becomes embedded in the music. So you don't need to nail the correct tone for the language speaking purposes as much, because the melody is what's kind of guiding it, right? So that's making it a lot easier. And then I'm realizing very quickly how challenging it is when, like, I'm focusing most of my actual language learning on Mandarin right now, but even with only like, half the tones that Cantonese has, it's still like I'm like, seeing how challenging that is to just like remember all this stuff. So
Well, congratulations, Daniel. This is really impressive that you're singing in Mandarin. And
yeah, in both languages. So it's like it's pretty special, and I'm excited because last year it was primarily more like my participation in Jade. I wasn't able to have as much Chinese language music as I wanted, and so through all the different events I've done throughout with the Asian Canadian Special Events Association over the last year, I've had more opportunities to keep building my repertoire and challenging myself.
but you
So
also performed in Taiwan too, and I'm wondering what that was like.
yeah, and by by the time I was in Taiwan, I had built up like a solid repertoire, and like I had two solid covers, one in Cantonese, one in Mandarin. Um, and then I had some lyrics for my own songs translated. So, but then for my own songs, it would be about how, let's say 50% of the song would be in Mandarin. So, but I've built upon that. And then so for this upcoming Jade Music Festival, I have two songs that are part of this set that are original, that are completely in Mandarin. Then there's maybe another song of mine or another two songs that are like half in Mandarin. And then then I have my first song actually, and half of it is in Cantonese.
That's
So,
fantastic.
and I feel really good about finally introducing the Cantonese into the original music, just because, that one is like closer to home, just like with my upbringing. So, and it was great. Handwash, the one of the hip hop artists that's part of Jade, he actually helped me with the translation for the Cantonese, because Caroline was not able to do that.
Oh, Handwash is an amazing performer.
Yeah.
Um, Now, your album Destiny, you went on tour on that. What would you like people to know about Destiny?
Hmm. Well, it's got a lot of different themes in it. I mean, it really just, yeah, there were a lot of things I wanted to say and stories to tell last year's project. So it kind of combines a lot of different things. Like, obviously the title track Destiny was kind of inspired by this whole like manifestation concept, and I feel like the whole like self-help genre of books and media is very like trendy right now, and like, when I think that's a good thing. I think people are like looking for answers and whatnot, and the sentiment of that song in particular kind of embodies that. So, and I think by me stepping into my own power as an artist, and then very basically, and then realizing, oh, maybe it is all just your destiny, but you have to believe in yourself first in order to like embody the energy that it is you're seeking. So that's one theme that's in the album. There's a theme, there's a bunch of themes of different kinds of love, like, accepting the concept of universal unconditional love that exists in reality. And there's like a theme of familial love, in particular, like brotherly love, and the tensions, and then the beauty and darkness that there is in that. There's some romance in there too. Um, and then what, and then there's one of my favorite songs on the album, "Trade It All Away," is this lovely story about, just growing up with a simple life, but desiring, you know, the bells and whistles, and then coming back to terms with the fact that, the simple life was maybe all you needed. So
That's a great song, and I'll put it in the article attached to this video so people can listen to it. But maybe you could talk about the inspiration for that song.
yeah, that song was inspired by a brief email conversation that I had with the founder of Visa credit cards.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
You actually contacted the founder of Visa credit cards.
yeah, Mr. D Hawk. It was a very random occurrence because, yeah, just I was just pondering this one day, and then I looked it up, found him, and then I ended up finding his email, and he was very kind, and he responded within a day. And so we had a couple of email exchanges talking about his story, but also we had this, he was giving insights to this kind of societal puzzle that I found myself perplexed by. And it was like this intersection between healthcare and capitalism, and how it can appear at times that, you know, the the system is not in the best interest of health, when profit is a driving force and a reality of the economic system that we have. So yeah, no, very random to have these types of thoughts, but I was like, you know what? I feel like this guy will have the answer to my questions, and yeah, so yeah, we
Well,
chatted
it
about.
sounded like it opened an interesting door for you.
Yeah, yeah.
The um, the other thing is you went on tour
Hmm.
and drove almost all the way across Canada, which is an incredible thing to do when you think of how vast this country is.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what stood out for you on your tour.
Well,
Maybe
first,
so many things.
yeah, there's so many things. Well, first, I'll just give a little shout out to Tennyson King, because last Jade Music Festival, he did a panel just talking about his journey, like being an independent musician and touring all the time. Because I'd never heard of the dude, and I'm like, how have I never heard of you, man? Like, you're pretty cool. And you're like,
Yeah, he calls himself, I think the indie rock folk nomad or something. He uses the word nomad to describe
oh
himself.
yeah, that guy is definitely a nomad. Like, he is like nomad hippie to the fullest. So that, I think, you have these things where in your path where you meet certain people, and they kind of almost like break down certain walls for you, because you're like, oh, you can just do it like that. And so like he kind of just showed me another way of, because like he's almost like a ninja in the sense of like, he's very successful at what he does, almost behind the scenes of, like, it seems, of some of like the commercial aspects of the industry. Anywho, so yeah, just want to pay my thanks to that, because I met him as a result of being part of Jade, right? So um yeah, it was crazy. I mean, from start to finish, I drove over 10,000 kilometers. It wasn't just like straight west to east. Like, I kind of like went up a bit, and like, my route was kind of all over the place. That's why I drove so much. But that was an experience because, first of all, I'm usually not someone who loves driving. So I'm like, man, like, how am I gonna get out? How am I gonna do this? But then it was just, I was so driven to just make this happen and grow as an artist, and just experience what this was like on my own. So, but you got to imagine, like, all that time in the car alone, like there was like, and I don't,
What does that do to your mind?
yeah, a lot of reflection. I actually did a lot of songwriting while driving. I just like had melodies in my head, and like, so a lot of time I wouldn't even like listen to music. I would just be like imagining song ideas, because I would have all this time that's uninterrupted. It was actually very helpful creatively. Um, I also listened to some like Mandarin podcasts to try to like indoctrinate myself from just exposure. But yeah, the drive was amazing, getting to see the landscape shift from our coast all the way to, I didn't get to the other coast, but all the way to Montreal. I can envision all the colors and how nature kind of changed, and very cool, very cool. I have family and friends kind of spread out across the country, so this was an excuse to be efficient and kind of uh, kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, and get to visit old friends and family, and I get to play music while doing it. So that was probably the highlight, getting to reconnect with everybody. And yeah, and there were some really cool experiences that happened. You know, someone was asking me what one of the highlights was the other day, and from a career standpoint, one really cool thing was I was in Toronto, and I had based my tour around Canadian Music Week and North by Northeast in the hopes that I would have gotten accepted into the festivals, and I didn't get accepted into either of them. But it didn't really matter because, like, for me, it was just that helped me book the tour, because I was like, oh, I'm aiming at this thing. So when I got to Toronto, I I was like, okay, well, I'm like, where is this Canadian Music Week happening? I looked it up, and it was like by this hotel near the lake. And then I was like, okay, why don't I just go busking outside, because it's got to be someone from the industry that's going to be coming in and out throughout the day. Why not? And I like have manifested like stuff like that before while putting myself out there. And yeah, and I met a bunch of different musicians while I was in that spot, and then the it culminated in me finally meeting Dan Mangan.
Oh, interesting.
So it was crazy because Dan walked by, and I know who he was, because like I've listened to his music since I was a kid. Like I remember being in high school when a coworker of mine was like a diehard fan, and she's like, "You gotta listen to this guy," and I was like, "Okay." And we had the same name, so I always thought he was cool, right?
Well,
Um,
your music also has some similarities to some of his music too. I don't know if you feel that,
yeah,
but
yeah, definitely. Must be a West Coast like
yeah.
singer-songwriter thing or something. But um, well, I found out he was a fan of John Lennon, and I'm a huge John Lennon fan. So I think if that's kind of part of your inspiration to be a musician, like there's going to be some similarities there from like just how your soul approaches the music. But so I saw Dan there, and then he walked by because he looked like he was on his lunch break or something, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." And I thought, you know what? If he walks by again, I'll introduce myself. And then he did walk by, and I said, "Hey," and I wanted to thank him because his business, Side Door Access, like this kind of indie business that like helps independent artists
Enables
book
people to
tours.
play. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I used his business for like 3 to 4 shows of my tour. So I was like, man, this is the guy that started it. So I was like, Dan, like, thank you. He's like, for what? And I'm like, well, here's my story. I'm on this tour, and like, I used your business to like be part of the tour. And he's like, oh, so you're here for Canadian Music Week? And I was like, no, man, like, I actually didn't get in, so, but you know, I'm here right now. He's like, no way. And then so he left because he had a keynote speech or something at the Canadian Music Week about his business. And then he came back out, and he was like filming himself. And then he was like, hey man, like, do you mind if I film you for this video? I'm like, sure. And so he films me. And then after he tells me, he was like, yeah, I'll make like a social media post about it. And like, he's like, oh, I just think this is so cool because like, you know, I just ended up talking about you in my keynote speech because you're out here like hustling. You didn't get in, but you use Side Door, and you're just trying to do, you know, it was just so cool, like the serendipity of it all. And then I remember like I was actually playing one of my Side Door shows in Waterloo, and then Dan had like released the video, and that caused like a 15 to 20% like increase in like my small but you know low social media
Oh, did
following that I have.
he included you in the video? Is that
Yeah. It was
wow?
almost like they have like this function on Instagram now. You can like create like a joint video, so it's like as a collaborator. So he did that, and it totally highlighted my music and showcased me to his entire audience. And that helped me get some exposure to the point where even like within like a week, like I got an extra gig in Ontario because some guy that owns a brewery saw the video. That's a Dan Mangan fan. Um, Made a bunch of other connections to musicians that know him. Um, yeah, and then himself just being a really nice guy and giving me a lot of encouragement and positive feedback, and just yeah, it was awesome. And then I remember he actually showed me, like, I think like a day or two later, he showed like Michael Bublé apparently saw our video. So we're like, oh, that's
Also,
good.
you were hanging out with Ed Sheeran at one point too. You're moving in big circles,
Oh,
Daniel.
so what about it's well, I was thinking about this quote from Shoeless Joe, uh, or I guess the movie Field of Dreams, and it said, "If you build it, it will come." You know, and I don't know, man. Like I think I really believe in that statement.
And as this section we're doing, it's called Beyond Chinese, and
Yeah,
it's looking at stereotypes and trying to present a more nuanced picture
yeah,
of the diversity within the community. I'm
yeah.
wondering, Daniel, how your heritage, because you've been on this very interesting journey, and what you've learned about your heritage as a result of starting to sing in Cantonese and Mandarin, or if you've learned anything,
Yeah,
maybe,
I mean, I see the beauty in the language. I see like it's made me like appreciate where my roots come from. It's made me a lot more curious about this whole vast, amazing place on the other side of the world that I have very little exposure to. And it made me, well, like, I feel like, you know, the image that, China and Asia and, many foreign places get depicted in North America is very biased, because there's just a view that the media is looking at and wants us to look at. So sure, every place is going to have pros and cons, but I feel like me learning more about the beauty of where I come from, like, that's happening the more that I like delve into even just the music, because it's just learning some of these anthemic iconic cover songs that I didn't even know existed. But maybe, you know, for example, like this Cantonese song "Hoi Foot Tin Hong," which translates to "boundless oceans, vast skies, but beyond." That song, ever since I learned that, it's almost like an immediate bonding point with anybody that has any sort of Chinese heritage, regardless of where you're from. And that's pretty cool, because one, you got to think about, well, that's a lot of people that know this song just from a population standpoint. So if I can, so that already is kind of mind blowing. It's like, wow, like, that's the power of music for you.
connects you to a lot more people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
Also, I'm wondering about because you also have an interest in philosophy and kind of different kind of spiritual practices and things like that. And I'm wondering what you've learned about Eastern approaches to
yeah,
life.
yeah, it's interesting because one of my uh favorite writer philosophers, his name is Alan Watts, who he was it's funny because Alan Watts is from the UK, but he was studying like Zen Buddhism and Taoism and things like that. And then he came to the West almost as like an interpreter during like the 60s, I think, to try to like, educate and share the word about some of the Eastern philosophy. So I think it's kind of interesting how my exposure to it ends up being through
Through a
him.
Westerner.
Yeah. Um, but that I think my open-mindedness to learn about Eastern philosophy is, of course, because of my heritage. Like, if you're not like, because I'm from there, I'm like, oh, like, it's almost like some of my openness is thinking, well, what do my ancestors like? What? How are they viewing things? I'm curious about that, and it's helped me actually find a lot of peace and understanding. I think that the the main symbol you think about, especially within the Taoism, is like the yin and the yang. And the
Mhm.
yin and the yang is really just like this depiction of contrast, and not having one without the other. And when I've made lists and lists of things that kind of exist in this way. So we take Vancouver, for example. Like, I never really complain about, I shouldn't say never. I try my best not to really complain about our weather, because look, like, the depressing gray skies and torrential downpour, sometimes floods, um, that makes me and us all appreciate the couple months of sun that we get. And then we all feel like, oh, we gotta take every moment to like juice every bit of sunshine that there is. And I was talking to my buddy who lives in Arizona the past like 10 years. I'm like, and he used to live here. So I'm like, how do you feel now that you've been living in the desert for like 10 years? He's like, honestly, man, yeah, I'm kind of sick of the sun. It's like we don't get anything else. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, so then it's like, again, yin and the yang,
Yeah.
right? And so that guy's gonna appreciate the rain a lot if he gets a rainy day. And so, like, but everything is operates like that. I'm finding, maybe I shouldn't generalize and say
Well,
everything,
I'm
but
also wondering whether it manifests itself in your music or in your songwriting.
yeah, very much so, very much so. You know, like, here's a song. So one of the songs I'm very excited to sing at Jade Music Festival, and I'm gonna release it at the time of the festival as well. It's a new, well, actually, it's a song that came out before my last album, but it was an English version called "Pass by the Willows." Okay, and then what happened was, Caroline heard it and it became one of her favorite songs, and she was like, "Oh, I think I would like to like translate this for you." And I said, "Really? Okay." And so she helped me do that and kind of breathe new life into this song. And then so I like kind of went back into my studio and like produced this new version that it's completely in Mandarin. So this will be my first released song that's,
Fantastic.
yeah. And so, like, to come full circle a year after joining Jade, this is a really like powerful moment for me. So I'm really excited about that. But to answer your question again about how the philosophy kind of infiltrates the music there. So Pass by the Willows, it's a song about this feeling of being like this thing with when we're human, of you're not really feeling content, and you're kind of constantly chasing what's next, and then you get that thing that you want, whether it's what a nice car, uh house, whatever it is, or next meal or whatever, and then you want something else. And this song was kind of born from a feeling. I was reflecting on some time where I had done some traveling, and I had gone to Indonesia, and there's many other travelers that all went to Indonesia, and like we were laughing because we all have like our spiritual book that we're trying to like find ourselves, the cliche thing, right? But I realized very quickly that, oh, okay, the answer is not actually going anywhere new. Um, it's for sure my eyes had to be open from seeing that, but come to a realization that, oh, this inner work can be done anywhere, regardless of where you physically are. But sometimes, yeah, we need like a refresh of some sort to maybe see things from a different vantage point. Um, but it made me realize, like, it was almost like this feeling of, okay, I'm gonna miss out on being present in life now if I'm constantly chasing the next thing. So the song is kind of like it's almost like a series of poems of different examples of this idea of like hedonism. Um, so yeah, my understanding of the philosophy kind of brings me back to, well, yeah, you can't have like pleasure without pain. There's no happiness without sorrow, and you kind of,
It's yin and yang.
yeah, it's the yin and yang. Even it's there's some irony in it too, of even the pursuit of like wisdom itself can miss the point. Like there was this one excerpt from one of the books that Alan Watts wrote about Zen, and he says the master is teaching the student and is saying like when am I gonna reach like enlightenment? Like, he's like trying to like seek it, right? And then the master keeps telling him like, well, you're missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you seek. It's like it's almost like, and this ties back into the whole destiny concept. It's very much a manifestation. It's like you embody it now, you know, whatever energy or like it is that like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Now, you've been very generous with your time, Daniel, and I appreciate it. I'll just ask a final question here: is where do you see your career going from here?
Well, I'm excited to just well, for the next little period of time in terms of like writing music and releasing music, I'm kind of shifting back into a gear of being a little bit more insular and wearing all the hats. And this is my last project, you know, as part of, I'm grateful for it. I was given a grant from Creative BC, so thank you again, Creative BC. And I was able to like, build a team of many collaborators that were underrepresented, many of them who are also Chinese Canadian. But that was the first time I did so much collaboration. And it was great. It was a different, it's just a different flavor of how you create. But for sure, like my bread and butter is like, I'm just, maybe it's my level of like introvert, but I love just kind of being the only one that really touches the work. I don't know. So like I'm kind of shifting that gear that direction again for my next projects for the most part. Um, you know, I just want to continue to grow as an artist and write songs that are exciting to me and are exciting to play. That was one thing of I learned from being on the tour was I just really want to have fun while I'm playing some of these songs, even if they are songs that have a more like introspective depth to it. I just want to be entertained by it. So I'm thinking a lot more about my live show when I'm creating the music now, and how what's currently missing from what I already have in my repertoire, and what can I expand on to be more to create an experience. So, you know, I feel like my journey is going in a way where my live show is going to continue to evolve, and like because I feel like I'm only getting started, so I feel like it's growing. I feel like my technical prowess is growing, so I think it'll just, yeah, my live show is just going to get a lot better. You know, I hope to just to play. Ultimately, it comes down to the fundamentals of just like writing music that I love, recording and releasing it, and playing as many shows as possible. Whether or not those shows are me on tour, or if I'm home right now and playing Granville Island like every single day, I'm gonna go right after this to go play there. And it's like because every day I see is an opportunity to share the music, regardless of the context. So it's like I have some idea of like commercial industry goals, but then sometimes when I bring my metric system, my value system back to be calibrated by the fact of my tinnitus and my hearing loss, sometimes I look at music just like, oh, like none of the industry stuff matters. Like I just need to like love music, pour my heart into it, share it with the world every day, regardless of like anything. So it's like, I don't know, like that's kind of the lens I've
When good things happen.
yeah, like that's kind of like the lens I'm looking through. So I just want to keep focused on that lens and let that guide me as I continue to move forward. You know, I hope that I know I will, you know, I'm not gonna, my ego still would like to grow from a commercial standpoint. So it's like if my journey opens those doors in the next few years or this year, who knows, like of having more opportunity, whether to open for um, you know, bigger named artists or collaborating with them, like, you know, I welcome those opportunities. I mean, I'm grateful for just even what's coming up next, like just to mention Jade again, like one of the I'm excited for both the performance at Performance Works on Granville Island, because Granville Island's kind of like one of my homes now. It's kind of neat to I'll play at a different venue there. And two, like this performance I get to do at the Vogue Theater, that's kind of a dream come true, man, because I've seen so many concerts there. like just as a music fan, like I've just gone to the Vogue so many times. So like to know that, you know, I get to play there, like that's very meaningful for me.
Well, there might be 1,000 people in the room. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and Serini and Eno are fabulous artists. I was able to see them play in Taiwan, and you know, they're both like pretty big, like well, they're household names. Like
Yeah, the other one, Eno Chang. Yeah.
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 So yeah,
That'll be good.
I'm grateful for that.
Well, this is great, Daniel. I can let you go now. Thank you so much for speaking to me.
Thank you for remembering and just giving me this opportunity. It's I'm grateful for every opportunity I get.
Well, it's fun to track your career, and you've had an incredible year. I've been speaking to Vancouver singer-songwriter Daniel Lew. He will be performing at the Jade Music Festival in Vancouver on November 7th and November 8th. And then from there, Daniel's going to be going to Victoria on November 13th at Victoria House. The following night, he's at Charles Landing in Port Alberni, and I wish you the very best, Daniel.
Thanks, Charlie. Wish you the best too.